In times of crisis, or pseudo-crisis like our current predicament, people immediately throw their hands up at the mere thought of letting morality get in the way of their idea of the greater good. It's almost as if everyone memory holds their visits to the DMV when they get the idea they can solve societal problems by giving authority to a bunch of rent-seeking bird-brain retards. But the free market means everything will be for profit. Nationalizing it fixes that. No, because politicians are also people who like getting money. And the only difference is, unlike a filthy plebeian like you, they have access to the bureaucratic machine gun pointed at your head at all times. Imagining a hypothetical state that runs like a well-oiled machine is the pornographic fantasy of the conservative temperament, and some people engage in it so much they start thinking it's what real order is like. A strong man with a mustache and a suit telling you what he's gonna get done. Your leaders take your money to get high on meth and do satanic seances. When they hear your family just got killed by Somalis, they're doing cartwheels and backflips and lighting firecrackers. This is the case because they benefit off your misery. The bigger the problem, the bigger the clamor for state involvement and expansion, which means more money and power to them. And seeing as you have no alternative, there's no accountability, not a single incentive to be frugal. They can do whatever they want and it's all a zero-risk investment without a chance of reprisal to them. Incentives matter more than the morals they claim to have in speeches. You know why? Whereas economic power is extremely costly to exercise, such as YouTube bleeding cash like a stuck piggy bank in order to ban wrong opinions, statesmen get fat paychecks to rule over you. They are the modern royalty. But don't you worry for a second. Every cent in their pocket goes towards the inverted indulgence of the mortgage payments for the real estate they're financing in hell. These positions of power are nothing more than an allowance given to spiritual slaves who will do whatever their adrenochrome plug tells them to. Because if they don't, their supply gets cut off and the evidence of them raping kids comes flooding out. This happened to Epstein and it'll probably happen to Weinstein and tons more people in the future. Get ready, because the elite are playing a game of Russian roulette with a rocket launcher. People in power aren't omnidestructive parasites by accident. The state attracts them because it needs to keep problems around to secure its existence. What, do you think it's gonna make things better and then kill itself? Get real. Like any beast, it has self-preservation instincts. The closest we've come to large-scale moral bodies of government were medieval monarchies and the Icelandic Commonwealth, and even those didn't manage to stick around, and gave way to the shameful decadence we now inhabit, with children living alongside possessed sodomites. It astounds me that people are naive enough to think that they can outsource the maintenance of order to a king or a president or whoever, instead of holding themselves accountable for working towards the ultimate common good. Everybody would be so much better off if they were concerned with themselves rather than the world, emphasized unity over division, and focused less on how things aren't what they should be and more on what they can improve. I say this stuff because I've been there, where some of you may be right now, going on pull every day and exposing yourself to painful information you can do nothing about. There's nothing more demotivating than that. You have to leave that mindset behind you and never look back. Black people would have a way easier time lifting themselves out of servitude to big butts and gold chains if it weren't for the crack and welfare checks getting funneled into their communities by the government. The white person's crack and welfare check is becoming cynical as a means of psychological self-defense. It's submitting your faith to false idols that will disappoint you when they fall through. And when they do, it'll kill your motivation and your hope of the triumph of good, which is why you cannot let that happen. Even if you do manage to get political power, it'll slip out of your hands because it's a rigged game. If I'm gonna be honest right now, if 4chan got shut down today, the net result will be hugely positive. And that goes for most social media activity. If some part of your being feels that to be true, delete whatever you can that won't make you lose money or friends. A big problem with a lot of people is that they think their ideology will vindicate everything when it gets implemented. Maybe you believe in traditional values, whether you're a conservative or a fascist or whatever. But all of that is utterly meaningless if you're still watching porn, smoking weed, or having casual sex. You don't even have ignorance as an excuse. You know it's wrong, but you do it anyway because you're not a man yet and you need to man up. This is actually the biggest issue with libertarians, because they promote liberty above all else, then go on to say they're okay with prostitution and drugs. Tell me, what's the use of economic freedom when you're a slave to your own body? What good is it to evade taxes when you're going to use that money to buy dope, to pay for subscriptions to porn sites, to buy hookers or sex dolls or donate to e-girls? These things are all extremely useful to tyrants since, if you're a weak addict, you can't defend your rights, your land, or your family. A lot of libertarians are atheists and don't even want to have a family, and that terrifies me. If you don't believe in absolute morality, truth, and good, it makes no sense to care about property. Because just like those three things, property is a metaphysical concept that requires validation. Relativism ruins any prospect of true liberty. How can you fight the tyrants of this world when you're being corroded from the inside by the tyrants of the spirit? I have no option but to burst the libertarian bubble that somehow, in a world with no safety nets, welfare, or public health care, junkies, prostitutes, drug dealers, homosexuals, etc. would fly. They wouldn't. Valuing liberty means discriminating against everything that violates that principle. And despite what you might think, gays and weed smokers are quite often the main offenders. It's in their title, degenerates. They degenerate, and the only reason they don't right now is because they're practically subsidized. If they weren't, I cannot overstate the suffering they'd been inflicting on themselves. The truth is, the libertarian ethic is just a tool. The best tool, but just a tool nonetheless. You can use it to build a house for your family, or you can stick it up your butt. One thing is for sure though, a truly free society would never tolerate those who attempt to destroy or poison others. So selling drugs or peddling HRT to kids would get you a nice big lead salad, real fast. Additionally, I don't accept the maxim of moderacy that says you have to balance the extremes. The political compass isn't objective, so the only balance you'll get from it is between gay French Jews from the 19th century and gay French Jews from the 1960s. There's no such thing as gray areas. If you look close enough, you're gonna see the split. I also don't buy the idea that socialism would magically start working with white people, and I cringe every time I see that capitalism and communism are two sides of the same shekel trope. Nothing is more retarded than pagans that say Jesus was just a Jew on a stick, preaching morals to atheist heathens who read Ayn Rand and think Gary Johnson and Penn Jillette are awesome. Honestly, I couldn't tell you which is worse. But at least pagans have some metaphysic, which is better than libertarian hedonists who think homosexuality and pornography are dandy. The objective is to not approach political topics directly like this again, since all political discussion is encouraged by demonic forces to generate divide, which is always bad for you. You're not truly free from ideology in the claws of modernity if you're getting caught up in politics too frequently. Being an activist of any sort is aiming at your enemy and then shooting homing missiles that are programmed to target you. Ends don't justify means, but you should get your ends in check ASAP, because if you got the wrong ones, you're on a bullet train to nowhere, fast. Just in case you are a poll guy, consider that the things you support in the name of a greater good might be counterproductive to it. If you recognize the ethics are solid but see them as obstacles to your objectives, and think that if your enemy does it, you should too, ask yourself the following. Should you just submit to evil, since it's always going to be around? And on the off chance that there is a single person who still hesitates to become a quote-unquote extremist watching this, be cold or hot, because if you're lukewarm, prepare to be spat out. Turn not to the right hand nor to the left, but walk in the way which your Lord commanded. Embrace Catholicism.